good. NicholasThurkettle, actor, writer, co-author of Seen by Moonlight. I mean, we want to thank you so much on short notice joining us this week. We really appreciate it, you spending a few minutes with us. So welcome.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you so much.
And I guess, Nick, we're going to just get right into it because, I mean, what we've seen in the past, couple of weeks with Virgin Galactic, the Antares rocket, give us an overview of the latest information on what's caused these two serious space setbacks to occur within a few hours of each other, and how to make sure these similar incidents don't happen again.
Well, we do have two real catastrophes, and we have to use that word. The Antares rocket, thank goodness, no one was injured. I mean, we lost an incredible amount of equipment. There were actually a large number of kids' science projects loaded onto that rocket that were going to go up to the space station. So I'm sure there's a whole lot of heartbroken kids right now about that. But thank goodness no injuries. Whereas in the case of Virgin Galactic, obviously we did, have one fatality from it, and that's. It does force you to take some perspective on the whole thing. You really had two very different causes when it came to these accidents. In the case of the Antares rocket, you had an engine which was originally called the NK-33 engine, which was actually built by the Soviet Union back in the late 60s. Now, this was a piece of technology that was designed to put Soviet cosmonauts on the moon, and obviously they never did that. So, you had these things, for all intents and purposes, sitting in a warehouse, and they were being repurposed by this company, Orbital Sciences, to fulfill a contract to send supplies up to the space station. So you've got, a very old piece of equipment that was designed for a different purpose entirely, and they were so sort of unfamiliar with working with it. The Soviets had an entirely different kind of research track to develop their space program from ours. So they were, outsourcing some of the project to Ukrainian companies from all over, just to kind of make these engines work on their rocket. So, the full story is still kind of being told as to what exactly happened. But, the consensus has been that it was, sort of a malfunction having to do with trying to make those engines work. Now, when it comes to Virgin Galactic, the NTSB is, already heavily involved in this, and they have an operating theory, but it's going to be many months before they put this back together. And the reason is that they are incredibly meticulous. I mean, they're going to be recovering every single piece of this craft and, sort of tracking the data second by second as to what happened to it while it was in flight. What they do know is that, it wasn't an explosion. There had been talk early on about how this flight was a test of a new sort of plastic-based fuel mixture because the previous fuel they'd been using wasn't kind of fulfilling the goals of the project. And so people were wondering, hey, they're using a new fuel. Has that been responsible? But the NTSB has already said they found not only the engine, but the fuel tanks completely intact. So there was no explosion. What we really have is a case of the ship just breaking apart mid-flight. And they have a theory as to why that happened. The way this plane is designed, in order to save fuel on the way down, it does what's known as feathering, in that a tail section is actually going to change shape in order for the plane to glide down to the ground safely with no fuel use at all. But what happened, it seems in this case, is that tail started to deploy while it was still accelerating and gaining altitude, which it's not supposed to do at all. And they're trying to figure out exactly how that happened. But clearly, the simplest mechanical failure in that regard, at that velocity and that height, I mean, it was catastrophic and fatal, as it turned out.
Nick, I have to ask you this question. It's for me, for someone who's a novice, who's on the outside, who's watching cable news and sitting there, and I'm going to say, is NASA sputtering and dying because the government funding cuts and lack of vision?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I actually think it's sort of a separate question to what we're dealing with right now. I mean, parallel in a certain sense. What we're seeing here, if you really want to step back and look at it historically, is that we're really seeing the government gradually detaching itself from a great deal of the business of space and really investing heavily in the private sector and allowing the private sector to handle this. I mean, both of these companies, Orbital Sciences and Virgin Galactic, I mean, they have government contracts, but they are essentially private entities that are in the business of putting things into space. And they each sort of have their own business model. They each have their own way of going about it, and they're all learning and developing and advancing as quickly as possible along the lines that they think will make them a successful business. So, I mean, NASA has had a great deal of difficulty in recent years sort of justifying its existence in the, and I don't want to get into political or economic issues, but obviously there's enormous pressure to justify what it is that they do. And I think the increasing reliance on the private sector probably has a lot to do with them sort of handing some of these things off and allowing the private sector to kind of take up some of this burden so they don't have to fight all those fights. But, I actually see that as cause for optimism, because if you think about it, we started building rockets to prepare for war, and now we've got these companies. I mean, Virgin Galactic, part of their business model is they're going to take ordinary people into space. I mean, right now only people who are a little richer than you and I can afford the ticket, but that's their business model. That's their ambition. And I think that's an incredibly hopeful thing and an optimistic thing that we're transitioning from a science that was first financed in order to defend us and, as part of the Cold War, and that this is the mission that we're moving to, I think is cause for a great deal of excitement. And whether it's the government or the private sector or this combination that we've seen so far continuing to carry it along, I think it's, I think we're on a path that we can feel better about.
So I got to ask you this question, Nick, and just in the public eyes, mm-hmm. What does NASA and private sector need to do to kind of redeem themselves?
Well, I think for the moment, and obviously we've got a situation that's very current and is sort of changing day by day. I think for right now, for the immediate moment, we really need to take a moment and honor what's happened. I mean, death has always been a part of the space program and the space race. This isn't even the first fatality that Virgin Galactic has had to deal with. They had 4 people in 2007, I think it was, killed at this same test site in Mojave because of an explosion of nitrous oxide. So it's sort of inextricable from what's going on. And I think at the immediate moment, what really needs to be done is take a moment and really give reverence to the sacrifice that's been made. I mean, this pilot, Michael Alsbury, he was an award-winning test pilot. He had 1,800 hours up there. He was a husband and a father, and he knew the risks. But at the same time, I think we need to take this moment to kind of pay our respect. But at the same time, the people who take on this mission, I think they also have a sense that there's a higher purpose here, and that we do need to eventually keep moving this thing forward. And I think what they need to do is just find some successes to get us back in the habit of it, of feeling good about this. I mean, statistically, it's kind of an awful coincidence that these two things happened, because the track record overall has been really, really good and getting better by the year. But, stuff like this happens, and it really does cast a harsh spotlight on what's going on. So, I mean, yeah, they're going to have to take a moment and acknowledge that something pretty awful and tragic has happened, and then figure out a way to get themselves back on the path of success. When it comes to NASA, I mean, they have the continuing Mars mission that was an enormous success and something they could be pretty proud of, but that's kind of faded from the public's eye, and so I mean, we'll see what's next for them.
Very quickly, would you privatize NASA altogether?
At this point, I don't see that that's the right path right now, and the reason is that we've still got we've got an international space station up there, and it's one of the things that NASA has to kind of keep under its authority, and because it's international, because it involves sort of high-level diplomatic cooperation with other nations. I mean, you've got Russia, which is Russia has the only means we have of transporting astronauts to the International Space Station, and if you've been paying attention in the news lately, our relationship with them is pretty strained, and so you have to have a governmental entity to be able to still be part of that process, because then it, I think it allows things to continue operating a little bit more smoothly in that regard, because you can't sort of get the politics out of it as long as these nations need to cooperate in this way, and all of their space agencies are nationalized as well. So I don't think it's the right thing right now, but I do really like seeing that both the government and the private sector through things like the Ansari X Prize, which is what prompted the plane design that resulted in the Virgin Galactic Spaceship 2, that we're stimulating the marketplace kind of both from the public and private sides, and I would like to see that happen. Yeah, it's not the moment now, but maybe we'll get to that point. And if we did, I wouldn't mind seeing that at all.
The portfolio, your portfolio is getting larger by the moment. I'm going to say screenwriter, playwright, author, rocketry expert. Add that also. Tell us really quickly about Seeing by the Moonlight.
Well, Seeing by Moonlight is a novel that I co-wrote with a gentleman named M.F. Thomas, and he was the one who really introduced me to this world of rocketry, because a great deal of the novel takes place during World War II, and it kind of peels back the cover on the German rocketry program during the war. And, a lot of people might not be aware, but a lot of the American space program came out of Germany. I mean, it was the German space program, because we sort of repatriated a lot of their scientists after the war, and a lot of them ended up working for NASA and creating a lot of the stuff that let us win the space race, as well as the arms race. So, when you dig into that stuff, it's really amazing to see that in the 1930s and 40s, there were German scientists already talking about how do we put people on the moon? How do we get that done? I mean, it's mind-blowing to think about, but the concepts were already there. And so, MF and I got really excited about how to tell a really thrilling story about, what might have been. So we've got a story that takes place sort of half in World War II and half at the end of the century in 1999. And it centers on this guy who's a seemingly regular American car salesman, very successful, sort of wants the American dream out of life, but he was adopted from an orphanage in East Germany before the Cold War ended. He's always kind of wondered where it was he came from, gets the opportunity to go to Germany on business, starts digging into his past, and finds that not only does he find out what his true parentage is, he finds out that he's connected to this conspiracy that dates all the way back to World War II and is still going on. So, you've got a race against time, you've got Nazi cults sort of, operating in plain sight, and I don't want to give too much away, but it gets pretty exciting by the end, and some of it is real history and some of it is stuff we made up, but we hope when you read it you won't tell the difference.
Nicholas, it was a blast having you. Let our listeners know how to get in contact with you via social media.
Oh, sure, absolutely. My website is NicholasThurkettle.com. That's NicholasThurkettle.com. On Twitter, I'm N.Thurkettle, last name spelled the same way. And, you can find Seeing by Moonlight at, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all of the leading digital retailers.
Hey, Nick, we want